everybody, Deathblade here. Today I'm going to be talking about a topic that I think is a little bit polarizing in the online web novel translation community. There are a lot of people who really like harem stories, and there are a lot of people who really do not like them. When I'm talking about a harem story, for any of you who aren't very familiar with the online web novels, it's when the main character has multiple love interests or multiple wives throughout the course of the story. So I'm going to talk today about why I think they're common and why I think they are accepted in China. And of course, that's why you see them in a lot of the novels. Now, in terms of why they're popular, I mean, the obvious reason is the audience is primarily young males. And so the idea of having a whole bunch of beautiful girls all in love with you and stuff, that's obviously kind of attractive. So I don't think we need to get into too much detail about why it's popular in that regard. One thing to consider is how polygamy and the concept of a harem or having multiple wives is something that goes way, way back into Chinese history. I did a little bit of research, and I don't want this video to turn into like a historical discussion about it, because that's not the point. So I didn't spend too much time, but what I can tell you is that it goes back, I think, almost back to the very beginning, just about. Men, especially men who were powerful or who had a lot of money, would want to have multiple wives and concubines, presumably with the goal of ensuring that their family continued to pass down from generation to generation, and also as a way to show their level of power or wealth. And that especially goes for the emperor. For those of you who aren't too familiar with China and Chinese culture and stuff, the Forbidden City in Beijing, which was the imperial palace for a long time toward the later part of imperial China, there was a part of the palace specifically set aside for the concubines of the emperor. And going back throughout the thousands of years of Chinese history, you can find accounts of emperors who had ridiculously large harems. Some of the accounts even talk about emperors who had wives and concubines into the tens of thousands. And I think most historians don't really take that to be literal, more exaggerations. Some of that had to do with the fact that sometimes a new emperor would sort of like inherit the concubines from the previous emperor, his father, and so the harems could grow very large over a period of time. If you're interested in that, there's a lot of historical stuff that you can, uncover if you do a little bit of digging. So I think there's a very big historical precedent for it, much more so than in Western culture. So in Western culture, with the Judeo-Christian values that are kind of permeate a lot of society. I mean, when you read the Bible, you read about people having multiple wives. That stuff happened thousands of years ago, and the actual practice was not common. I mean, anytime in modern times. But for China, that's not necessarily the case. Even up into, I don't know, maybe the last 100 years or a little bit more than that, it would have been legal and maybe even common and accepted and not looked down upon at all toward the end of imperial China for a man to have multiple wives. Nowadays in China, it is not legal and it is not common. However, there are two things that I want to talk about that play into one of the reasons why I think it's more accepted, or why it's seemingly completely accepted in these novels designed for young men mostly, to have this kind of depiction of the main character's love life. The first thing I want to talk about is the Xiaosan. In Chinese, those characters mean little and the number for 3, so like the little third. And the Xiaosan is basically a mistress. And the word can be used loosely, but the thing is, it's actually very common for men in Chinese culture to have a mistress that's called a xiaosan. And when I say very common, I don't have statistics or anything like that. And I think it would be hard to do that. I'm going to link to an article or two down in the description of the video that you can get some more information about it from, or you can just search for it on your own and find lots of articles and information about it. It's not uncommon in the news to hear about wives finding out about the mistress kept by their husband and then confronting the woman in the street and beating her up, with bringing her friends along and tearing her clothes off and things like that. Here's a few pictures. There's a lot more graphic pictures online that you can find in China. However, it's actually not uncommon for the women, the wives, to know that their husband has this mistress, this xiaosan, this little third, but actually she doesn't do anything about it. And there's a lot of complicated reasons that play into that. Perhaps the wife has ownership in property or businesses that's connected to the husband. She doesn't want to get divorced, and so she just kind of pretends that it doesn't happen. That kind of thing is not really uncommon. And for these mistresses, these xiaosan, basically what will happen is the guy will, it depends on, the arrangement, because obviously it's not, a set arrangement, but a lot of times the guy will pay for her apartment, and he'll buy her clothes, shoes, jewelry. He'll give her life expenses. I mean, basically he's paying her like a salary is one way to look at it. The other way to look at it is he's giving her money so that she can, live her daily life. And then she's kind of like on call for him, presumably in a different city, but sometimes even in the same city. It's really not uncommon for these kind of things to happen. And again, it's not like everybody in China as a whole approves of this kind of arrangement. It's looked down upon for sure in most circles and by most people, but it's accepted and tolerated, and it's not necessarily viewed as some horrific crime against morality or something. Oh, I actually was thinking about a really, really popular movie. I'm sorry, I can't remember the name of it in English. It's called Ren Zai Jiong Tu in Chinese. I'll pull up the English title later. But actually the entire premise of the movie has to do with the main character of the movie, the hero sort of, trying to visit his xiaosan, his mistress, during the Spring Festival time. I think that's, again, it's been several years since I saw it. I have to go back and check the specific plot, but it was about him. I remember him calling her and then calling his wife, going back and forth and trying to juggle these two things. It was kind of one of the themes of the movie, and then in the very end of the movie, the mistress leaves a letter for him at his house with his wife, and it's like this dramatic scene and stuff. My point is just, it's a part of mainstream culture that it's okay to make blockbuster movies about, and that's how accepted it is. Now, there's another arrangement that's common in China. Again, I hesitate to say common, but it's definitely more common and open than it would be in the Western world, especially, and that's called the arnai, or the second wife. And so again, polygamy is not legal in China. It is illegal in China. But it is not uncommon for men, especially really, really rich men, to have a second wife. Now, I can attest to the truth of this because my wife's father has a business associate who I actually met once in the hometown, and he has a second wife. So basically, he has a legal first wife and a child and house and car and business and everything in the main hometown. And by the way, everybody in town, it's a pretty small town, everybody knows about this. It's not like some big secret. And the wife knows about it as well. That in the next town over, he has a second wife with either one child or two, I can't remember, and a separate house and a separate car and everything. And it's pretty much open and above board. Everybody knows about it. Now, it's not legal. She's not legally his wife. But for all intents and purposes, she is his second wife. And there's a specific term for that in Chinese. And for men who are really, really rich, my feeling is that it's not as common within the big cities. In the more like civilized or cultured areas of China, I feel like it's more common outside of that. But I haven't really done any studies about it. So the whole point of why I'm telling these two different things is, as you can see, when there's a culture where it's really common to have mistresses or even other wives, why nobody is really thinking twice about main characters of fantasy stories having that same thing. So this is not a scientific explanation of why you see it so much in the stories or why they're so accepted, but I think it should give some of you a new perspective about it. And with that, I'd like to ask your opinion. What do you think about the harem stories? Do you like them? Do you dislike them? Why? Do you think they're okay? And what do you think about this phenomenon of the mistresses and the second wives in China? Something that, again, was part of their culture for many thousands of years and then was taken away, but yet still manages to linger on somewhere between the realm of what is legal and illegal. I'd be very interested in your thoughts. Okay, that's it for this video. I will see you next time.